The Kh-28 anti-radiation missile entered service with the Soviet Air Force in 1973. It is a large, fast weapon, 5.97 meters in length, 680 kilograms at launch weight, a liquid fuel rocket motor that accelerates it to Mach 3.5 during the flight phase. Its guidance system does not use radar, GPS, or inertial navigation in the conventional sense. It homes on electromagnetic emissions. The seeker head is pre-programmed with a frequency band corresponding to the target radar's known operating parameters. When the missile is released, the seeker finds the strongest emitter in its designated frequency band and follows the emission to its source. It will continue homing as long as the emission is present. If the emission ceases, the missile enters a memory mode. It continues on the last known bearing for a programmed duration, then either self-destructs or impacts wherever the trajectory takes it. The design philosophy of the Kh-28 is simple, and it has not become less elegant with the passage of 50 years. To be found by the missile's seeker, the target radar must transmit. To transmit is to be targeted. The radar that stops transmitting denies the seeker its guidance source and may survive. The radar that continues transmitting guides the missile precisely to its own destruction. The E-2D Hawkeye's AN/APS-145 radar does not have an off switch in the operational sense. It can be shut down, but shutting down the primary airborne early warning and control aircraft serving a carrier group removes the tactical picture that every aircraft in the carrier air wing depends on. An E-2D that goes dark for everyone. The 9 minutes it takes to restart the APS-145 from cold are 9 minutes, during which every fighter in the carrier air wing loses its corroborated tactical data. In a contested environment, 9 minutes is a long time to be blind. The IRIAF Su-22 M4 fitter is a 1970s-era swing-wing strike aircraft whose continued operation in Iranian service is a testament to the engineering persistence that sanctions and embargo have forced on the IRIAF's maintenance community. It has approximately 60 airframes remaining in various states of operational readiness. Its primary operational role has shifted from the ground attack mission it was designed for to a platform for carrying air-to-surface standoff ordnance against naval targets, specifically the Kh-28. The Kh-28 allows the Su-22 to engage a radar-emitting target from beyond the defensive envelope of most shipboard systems, releasing at a range where the launch aircraft can turn immediately for the coast before any responding interceptor can reach it. The tactics are simple. The physics work. The Su-22 does not need to be a capable air-to-air platform to make the Kh-28 mission viable. It needs to fly fast enough and far enough to release the missile and get out. Nothing about its mission requires it to engage the defending aircraft. That is the defending aircraft's problem. At 8:33 a.m. over the Strait of Hormuz, USS Theodore Roosevelt was 94 nautical miles southeast of the Iranian coast, transiting outbound from a Gulf of Oman exercise to its Red Sea station. The exercise had been publicized. The transit route was not classified in any meaningful operational sense. Carrier group transits through the strait are tracked by every coastal nation from the moment the group enters visual range of the coast. The E-2D was at 22,000 feet, APS-145 active, covering the northern approaches. The Su-22 appeared on the APS-145's picture at 8:33 a.m. and 17 seconds, climbing from a coastal airfield in Khuzestan province at low altitude, 1,800 feet, the profile of an aircraft using terrain and sea surface returns to reduce its radar detection range. The APS-145 resolved it as a small, fast jet at 68 nautical miles, closing at 480 knots on a bearing of 132 degrees. Bearing 132 from the Su-22's current position, directly toward the E-2D's orbit. The characterization took 41 seconds. Su-22 class, type confirmed by radar emission. SURA-D navigation radar, a signature as distinctive as a fingerprint in search mode. Not fire control, not targeting. Navigation radar in search mode was consistent with a crew flying an instrument approach in poor visibility, which the current weather was not, or with a crew navigating toward a specific point with a radar that was operating in the frequency band their primary weapon needed to be active. The Kh-28's seeker required pre-launch alignment to the target's emission parameters. The Su-22 crew's navigation radar search sweep at 68 nautical miles may have been scanning to confirm the APS-145's exact frequency and bearing before activating the Kh-28's seeker for final pre-launch alignment. The distinction between a navigation search sweep and a targeting alignment sweep at this range and in this frequency band was a technical assessment that the Hawkeye's electronic intelligence equipment could make in approximately 4 minutes. The F-35C had 4 minutes. The Su-22 had less. At 8:33 a.m. and 48 seconds, the scramble order reached the alert pilot. The catapult fired at 8:34 a.m. and 22 seconds. The F-35C cleared the deck in the standard 2.3-second stroke, the bow of the Roosevelt dropping away below the aircraft as the nose pitched up into the clear Hormuz morning. 27 degrees Celsius at sea level, -4 at 22,000 feet. The strait's surface a pale blue-gray with the humidity haze of late summer reducing the horizon to approximately 40 nautical miles. The gear retracted. The HMD populated. The Su-22 at bearing 318 range 62 nautical miles from the F-35C's current climbing position. The E-2D at bearing 015 range 19 nautical miles. The geometry was not comfortable. At 8:35 a.m. and 11 seconds, the Kh-28 seeker activated. The APS-145's electronic support measures package detected the Kh-28 pre-launch seeker sweep at 8:35 a.m. and 11 seconds. A narrow band, high-sensitivity emission in the exact frequency range of the APS-145's operating band from the bearing of the Su-22 contact at 58 nautical miles. The seeker activation was the event that confirmed the targeting sequence was underway. Pre-launch alignment complete. The release came at 8:35 a.m. and 41 seconds. The Kh-28's motor ignited from the Su-22's port weapon station. The infrared signature of the ignition was visible on the Hawkeye's passive sensors as a hard event, a missile motor, large. The liquid fuel rocket's output significantly hotter than any solid rocket booster at launch. The missile was airborne, heading southeast at Mach 1.4 and accelerating toward Mach 3.5, homing on the APS-145's continuous emission. Distance from the Kh-28's release point to the E-2D's current orbit position, 52 nautical miles. At Mach 3.5 average speed, time to intercept, approximately 1 minute and 48 seconds. At current acceleration from the launch speed, the missile would reach its terminal speed in approximately 28 seconds. For the first 28 seconds, the missile was slower and therefore more susceptible to interception geometry. After 28 seconds, at Mach 3.5, the closure rate between any intercepting aircraft and the Kh-28 became the primary geometric challenge. 1 minute and 48 seconds. The F-35C was at 9,800 feet and climbing at 8:35 a.m. and 41 seconds. Range to the Kh-28's estimated position, 48 nautical miles. Range to the E-2D, 17 nautical miles. The tactical problem was clear to anyone who read the geometry. The F-35C needed to intercept the Kh-28 before it reached the E-2D. The Kh-28 was homing on the APS-145's emissions. The APS-145 needed to continue operating to guide the Kh-28 and also to provide the tactical picture the F-35C was using to track the Kh-28. If the APS-145 shut down, the Kh-28 would enter memory mode and continue on its last heading for a programmed duration, approximately 30 seconds based on the Kh-28's documented memory mode parameters, before its terminal trajectory resolved wherever the momentum carried it. If the APS-145 shut down immediately, the Kh-28 was 52 nautical miles from the E-2D and had 28 seconds of memory mode flight, plus the terminal ballistic phase. The trajectory would place the Kh-28's impact somewhere between 15 and 25 nautical miles past the E-2D's current position, in empty water, not in the E-2D's orbit. Shutting down the APS-145 immediately would probably save the E-2D. Probably. The memory mode duration was documented from assessments of the Kh-28 variant, not from direct measurement of this specific missile's programming. Probably was not certainly. The CAOC's assessment, transmitted to the F-35C at 8:35 a.m. and 52 seconds, was a single operational instruction: Intercept Kh-28. A PS-145 will remain active to support intercept geometry. E-2D crew has been notified. APS-145 will remain active. The E-2D crew had been told that the radar that was guiding a missile toward their aircraft would continue operating to support the intercept of that missile. They had acknowledged. The professionalism of that acknowledgement would not appear in any document. The paradox was now the geometry. The APG-81 needed to track the Kh-28 to build an intercept solution. Tracking the Kh-28 required the APG-81 to emit. The APG-81's emissions were not in the Kh-28's homing frequency band. The APS-145 was the missile's target, not any F-35C emission. So the APG-81's active transmission was safe from becoming a guidance source. But the APG-81 needed the APS-145's continued emission to have a corroborated picture of the Kh-28's position, because the F-35C's own radar was struggling with a specific technical challenge. The Kh-28 at Mach 3.5 was producing a radar cross-section return that was not dramatically different from a large bird or a weather artifact at some ranges. The missile's small frontal cross-section and its supersonic speed produced a Doppler return that the APG-81's signal processors had to distinguish from atmospheric clutter using the Kh-28's unique velocity versus altitude profile. The first friction event at 8:36 a.m. was precisely this. The APG-81 lost coherent track on the Kh-28 for 7 seconds, as the missile crossed through a temperature gradient at 8,000 feet that bent the radar energy slightly off the missile's actual position. The Kh-28 was traveling at Mach 3.5 through a layer of warm, humid air over the strait. The APG-81 continued to track the temperature gradient, not the missile, for 7.1 seconds. 7 seconds at Mach 3.5 was 7.3 nautical miles of missile travel. The Link 16 track from the APS-145 maintained the Kh-28's position during the APG-81 dropout. The E-2D's own radar, guiding the missile that was destroying it, was simultaneously the navigation reference the F-35C needed to maintain the intercept. The APS-145 track was less precise than the APG-81's fire control mode by a factor of approximately 4 in positional accuracy. But it was continuous, it was available, and it was the only reference that didn't require the F-35C to be within the temperature gradient's effect. At 8:36 a.m. and 10 seconds, the APG-81 reacquired the Kh-28. Range to missile, 26 nautical miles. Range from missile to E-2D, 23 nautical miles. The fire control solution build, 51% confidence on the Kh-28's current track, below the employment threshold of 75%. 51% and 23 nautical miles between the missile and the E-2D. The intercept geometry required the F-35C to place itself in the Kh-28's path, not precisely in front of it, which would require suicidal geometry, but at a crossing angle that placed an AIM-120D in the Kh-28's path before the Kh-28 could complete its terminal flight. The AIM-120D's seeker, active at 8 nautical miles from the target, needed to acquire the Kh-28's radar cross-section. The Kh-28's frontal cross-section was small. The AIM-120D had engaged small, fast targets in testing. Whether it had engaged a target moving at Mach 3.5 in an operational scenario was a question the classified performance database answered, but the open record did not. The geometry was narrowing fast. Confidence, 58% at 8:36 a.m. and 20 seconds. The APG-81 needed 12 more seconds to reach 75% at the current build rate. 12 seconds at Mach 3.5 was the Kh-28, covering 12.3 nautical miles. At 8:36 a.m. and 32 seconds, confidence reached 75%. The solution was green. The AIM-120D released at 8:36 a.m. and 33 seconds. Fox 3. Active radar seeker, target bearing 315 from the F-35C's current position, range 21 nautical miles to the Kh-28's position. The AIM-120D's own seeker would go active at approximately 6 nautical miles to the target and required the Kh-28 to still be in the general sector of the seeker's activation cone. Activation at 6 nautical miles, calculated to occur at 8:36 a.m. and 51 seconds, 18 seconds after release. In those 18 seconds, the AIM-120D was under inertial guidance toward the last known position of the Kh-28. If the Kh-28 maintained its heading, which it would because it was homing on the APS-145 and the APS-145 was not maneuvering, the seeker activation geometry would place the target within the AIM-120D's acquisition cone. At 8:36 a.m. and 51 seconds, the AIM-120D's seeker activated. Lock-on occurred in 1.2 seconds, not a clean acquisition, a marginal one, the seeker finding the Kh-28's small cross-section at 6.1 nautical miles in the hot Hormuz air with a confidence that the seeker's own processing characterized as sufficient but not comfortable. The missile's terminal guidance adjusted to the new track. The second friction event arrived 11 seconds later. The Kh-28 passed through a zone of significant sea surface reflection at low altitude. The missile had descended to 1,200 feet as it entered its terminal dive profile toward the E-2D's position. At 1,200 feet over the strait, the sea surface reflection of the APS-145's emissions created a multipath environment that the Kh-28's seeker was processing to determine the direct path emission from the reflection. The multipath processing caused a 0.9-second variation in the Kh-28's terminal guidance path, a slight S-curve deviation from the direct approach vector navigating through multipath interference. The S-curve deviation placed the Kh-28 4.2 degrees off the AIM-120D's terminal track for 0.9 seconds. The AIM-120D's guidance adjusted. The adjustment was within the missile's terminal maneuvering capability but consumed lateral energy that the terminal geometry had not planned for. The kinetic event occurred at 8:37 a.m. and 4 seconds. The AIM-120D and the Kh-28 occupied the same position in space over the northern Strait of Hormuz at an altitude of 1,100 feet, 7.4 nautical miles from the E-2D's orbit position. The kinetic event was not a misdetection. The APS-145's own radar registered the loss of the Kh-28's coherent Doppler return at 8:37 a.m. and 4 seconds, simultaneous with the disappearance of the Kh-28's track from the F-35C's picture. Both tracks gone simultaneously. The missile that had been guiding the Kh-28 had guided the AIM-120D to the same point. The APS-145 had guided both missiles to the same place. At 8:37 a.m. and 8 seconds, the E-2D Hawkeye's APS-145 went to standby. The operational decision to shut down, taken by the E-2D aircraft commander 4 seconds after the Kh-28 track disappeared from the picture, was the correct procedural response to confirmed missile neutralization, plus the operational recognition that continuing to emit in a known anti-radiation missile threat environment invited further launches. The picture went dark for the carrier group for 9 minutes and 14 seconds, while the APS-145 restarted. 9 minutes and 14 seconds of reduced tactical picture. The carrier group's own Spy-6 radar network maintained local coverage. The F-35C section held position and provided local air picture relay via Link 16. The gap was managed. The carrier air wing operated with reduced picture quality for 9 minutes. At 8:38 a.m., the Su-22 that had released the Kh-28 was at 44 nautical miles northwest of its launch point, heading 344 northwest back toward the Iranian coast at maximum continuous power. It had turned immediately after release, exactly as the Su-22's mission profile called for. The F-35C held a passive track on the Su-22's SURAD navigation radar throughout the missile engagement. The Su-22 was the secondary priority. The missile was the primary, and the geometry had not permitted addressing both simultaneously. At 8:38 a.m. and 41 seconds, the Su-22 crossed back into Iranian territorial airspace, beyond the range where the F-35C's fire control geometry could support employment under the applicable ROE without additional authorization. The Su-22 reached its home airfield. The Kh-28 was in the water 7.4 nautical miles from the E-2D's last orbit position. The E-2D was intact, its crew uninjured, the APS-145 restarting its cold boot cycle.
The debrief ran 3 hours and 22 minutes and produced 4 findings.
The first finding was operational. The AIM-120D intercept of a Kh-28 at Mach 3.5 terminal speed in the Strait of Hormuz's multipath environment had succeeded against the assessed probability in the pre-mission planning model. The pre-mission model had assessed this intercept geometry at 58% probability of success, given the Kh-28's speed, the AIM-120D's cross-section detection performance against a small, fast target, and the multipath environment's effect on terminal guidance. 58% had been the number the CAOC had accepted when authorizing the intercept approach. The outcome was one realization of a 58% probability. The outcome could have been different. The debrief noted this explicitly. The second finding was the paradox documentation. The APS-145 had provided continuous Link 16 tracking of the Kh-28 during the 7.1-second APG-81 track dropout, and had thereby prevented the dropout from disrupting the intercept geometry. The APS-145 had tracked the missile that was targeting it with sufficient precision to provide a reference that maintained the intercepting aircraft's tactical picture during the only period when the APG-81's own track was unavailable. The Kh-28 had been guided to its neutralization partly by the radar it had been designed to neutralize, a closed electromagnetic loop that no engineer at Krasnodar machine building plant had considered when writing the original design specifications in 1972. The debrief's senior officer noted this in the written record without philosophical commentary. The third finding was the Su-22's escape geometry. The Su-22's immediate post-release turn had been executed with a precision that suggested the crew had briefed an exact reversal bearing and had executed it without hesitation or deviation. The Su-22 reached Iranian territorial airspace in 3 minutes and 41 seconds from release. 1 minute and 53 seconds less than the transit geometry's theoretical minimum if the reversal was not executed within 12 seconds of release. The Su-22 crew had released and reversed in under 12 seconds. A crew that had rehearsed this specific profile extensively. The fourth finding was the intelligence one. The Su-22 had launched from a coastal airfield in Khuzestan province that previous intelligence assessments had identified as a training base rather than an operational strike base. The Kh-28 was not a training round. Its liquid fuel rocket motor had ignited correctly. Its seeker had acquired and tracked the APS-145 through the full flight. The assessment that this airfield was a training base was updated in the intelligence product filed within 24 hours. 1 Su-22, 1 Kh-28, 1 F-35C, 1 AIM-120D, 1 E-2D Hawkeye with 9 crew. Time from Kh-28, release to Intercept, 1 minute and 23 seconds. APS-145 shutdown duration, 9 minutes and 14 seconds. Intercept probability at mission planning, 58%. Outcome, favorable. Margin of the kinetic event from the E-2D's last position, 7.4 nautical miles. Su-22 in Iranian territorial airspace before ROE, permitted follow-on action, confirmed. E-2D crew, 9, all present, all operational at mission close. The Strait of Hormuz at 9 a.m. was as it always is. The E-2D had resumed its orbit at 8:46 a.m., the APS-145 back at full power, the tactical picture complete. The carrier group continued its outbound transit. The Roosevelt's deck logs recorded the AIM-120D expenditure as a single line item under ordnance accountability. The E-2D crew filed their mission report at 9:30 a.m. The section describing the period from 8:35 a.m. to 8:37 a.m. was 4 paragraphs long. The last line of the last paragraph read, APS-145 maintained continuous emission throughout threat period per CAOC instruction. E-2D crew acknowledged. 3 words at the end, E-2D crew acknowledged.